Hello, all, and welcome, my new Counseling 120 family. With the stressors of Welcome Week officially behind us, I'd like to proudly welcome you all to our first official lecture for this class. Today's presentation, centered on the power of resilience and your capacity for success and persistence, one of my personal favorite lectures to give, is titled Grits and Flow. Today's agenda will cover three components in total. Number one, we will address the question of what is grit. Number two, we will go in depth for what it means to embody both a growth and a creator mindset. And three, lastly, we will discuss why we should not quote unquote try. But before we get started, as a gentle reminder, I do like to begin all lectures with a mental warm up to really get your minds ready to properly receive our respective lecture's content. So, if you direct your attention to the screen here, as you can see, today's warm up is a self reflection where I really want you to ponder on the question, what have you overcome lately? And whether it's something small like having to wake up a little bit earlier for school or for work, or something that you consider more profound like overcoming a significant life obstacle, please genuinely take a moment to truly deliberate on this question within the confines, of course, of your own comfort level. So, in other words, when you think of what you've overcome lately, be genuine, be authentic, be intentional, but more importantly, think of and share only what you're comfortable with sharing. So, with that said, feel free to pause the video now to really take a moment to reflect on your own ability to overcome. And when you're ready, unpause the video and meet me in the next slide. All right, so welcome back. I'm assuming you've given yourself sufficient time to really think about today's warm up. So thank you for your efforts. And I know it goes without saying, but your engagement and internalization of these questions and these assignments is really what makes a class like this much more of an enriching experience. So I do want to thank you for being very genuine and intentional with your efforts towards such activities. And for context, the reason I chose to use this topic specifically as a warm up for this lecture is because by answering the question of what you've overcome lately, you've already demonstrated the concept of grit, which of course is one of the main proponents of today's lecture. So, if you will, just think about it for a moment. I know it's cliche to say this, but you can literally be anywhere you want right now, doing anything you want, but you're not. You're here. Perhaps not physically, because of course this is an online class, but mentally, emotionally, you are present and you're willing to put yourself in a position to learn, to improve, to do better. Despite the fact that some of you, before you even press play on this very video, have probably experienced significant instances of blatant sexism. Some of you have dealt or are dealing with racism, ageism, or other forms of discrimination based on very superficial demographic qualities. Some of you have probably battled the challenge of learning in an underfunded public schooling system. Others perhaps struck with unfortunate events that have manifested by way of inconsistent transportation, housing insecurities, toxic relationships, and anything and everything in between. But despite this, you are here. So before we even define the word, by being here today, you've already demonstrated grit. So I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge this, and I did not acknowledge you, because even though I've never met most of you, it's important for me to let you know how much I genuinely appreciate everything you've done to make it here today, to applaud you for fighting the battles you had to fight just to be a college student amongst the other components of life in which you must balance. So if no one has told you this today, allow me to do so now. Thank you for all that you do to be all that you are. That, in essence, is what grit is about. But of course, this is still a college class, so I do have to provide some textbook definitions to ensure our quality of learning. So, more formally speaking, grit is defined as follows: it's your courage and resolve, it's your strength and resilience in character, demonstrated regardless of circumstance. So, allow me to dig a little bit deeper regarding the value of this concept of grit. While I value you for your uniqueness, I want to declare that one of, if not the single most important characteristics that you can embody as a student, as a professional, or simply as a human being in general, it's your ability to be gritty, to be able to look at your circumstance, no matter how challenging and no matter how seemingly insurmountable it may appear, but to still be able to hold your head high and truly believe that you can make things better, to be diligent and stubborn when quitting is not an option. That is grit. So as your professor for at least the next 16 weeks, I want to make something very clear. Your high school GPA, your looks, because yes, you are all incredibly beautiful, how nice you are, your parental structure, your family structure, these are all very important demographic qualities. I'm not going to minimize that or take away any of its importance. However, if there was one element that holds more weight that supersedes the factors that I just mentioned, specifically in regards to things you cannot control, it will be your grit, which is again, it's your courage, your resolve, your strength, your resilience to fight even when things are not going your way. So, if there's one thing I need you to develop in this class, it's to understand that you will not always be in control of your circumstances. In some cases, life will be extremely unfair to you. But you, my Counseling 120 family and friends, are bigger than your circumstances. You are more capable. You are more competent. You are more alive than your circumstances. And even if you don't believe me at this very moment, please stick with me during these next few weeks, and I'll do everything in my power to help you see what you should already know. That being, you have the capacity to be an incredibly gritty human being, and in certain really, really tough situations in life, it will be your grit that serves as a difference maker. In order to truly understand grit, let's go ahead and break down two of the concepts of which it is comprised. One being a growth mindset, second being a creator mindset. So let's start with the former, in this case, a growth mindset. Define: a growth mindset is the belief that ability and talent get stronger the more they are correctly and or deliberately used. So allow me to clarify this. I understand that some people can slam dunk a basketball. I understand that some people can make a living based on how society values their physical appearances, whether they're actor, actress, a model, or whatever the case. I'm not going to magically be able to do these things at an unparalleled level just because I believe in a growth mindset. On one hand, it's because, yes, we do have some limitations based on our genetics, also known as a genotype. But fortunately for us, and fortunately for those who embrace a growth mindset, we also have something known as a phenotype, which is the portion of your DNA that can be manipulated through practice and lifestyle. And that is what highlights the notion that grit and growth mindsets are not just belief cycles. I don't just believe and all of a sudden I become something. It's the idea that I have these belief cycles, but they're also tied to these very deliberate actions. And if I do this correctly, I can get better. I can get stronger as long as I, again, am doing these things very deliberately. So when you combine the two concepts of having a gritty or growth mindset and you're aligned with its actions, because you're not just about to talk, but you also walk the walk, it's in that combination that you allow yourself to open doors to untapped potential that exists inside of you. That is what a growth mindset entails. Now that we've covered the concept of growth mindset, the next step towards fully activating your grit is embracing the notion of a creator mindset, or in this case, step two. So, by definition, a creator mindset influences people to believe that they are always in relative control. Keyword here is relative. While we can't control the behaviors of others, we can always control our reaction and responses to others. So, remember, in the previous slide, we discussed how a growth mindset is someone who believes they can get better and will get better if they plan and act accordingly. A creator mindset, though, adds to this concept by way of understanding that we can't control all elements of life. Yes, sometimes luck will play a role. Yes, sometimes politics will play a role. But what one can do is be in full control over your reaction and responses to such luck, to such politics, to such external stimuli. So, for instance, I can't control power outages. That is beyond my scope of responsibility. But what I can do as a creator is to always have candles ready, to have battery powered lights ready, to have other emergency supplies ready to reduce the impact of such external events. I can't control the flow of traffic in the morning, but as a creator, I understand that if I choose to leave 20, 34 minutes earlier than the average person, traffic perhaps may not impact me as much. I can't make myself taller. But again, as a creator, I can wear clothes that complement and accentuate other traits of my physicality to make me still feel beautiful. Because yes, we are still beautiful. So in other words, creator mindsets have the ability not to make lemons, because of course only lemon trees can do that, but forgive the cliche, it gives us the ability to make lemonade once lemons are dealt, squeezing every ounce of juice that is in your control. So in other words, a creator mindset is the process of knowing what is it in life you must accept versus what is it in life that you can still create. This is the essence of a creator mindset. So the natural question emerges. Sure, I believe in grits, I believe in growth and creator mindsets, but how do I actually do this? How do I practice this? How do I embody these principles to become a natural part of my identity? If these are questions you're asking, if there are answers that you're seeking, look no further. Please allow me to use the next set of slides to teach you about the power of language and its relationship to grit. There are two principles in psychology titled the self-fulfilling prophecy as well as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. While you don't need to remember the specific names of these theories for the purpose of this class, what I do recommend that we all understand are the general principles of each. According to these theories, our behaviors, meaning the way we act, have a very, very tight relationship to how we think, in other words, our thoughts. And it is our thoughts that have a very, very tight relationship to our language, in other words, the way we speak. The key here, of course, being language. So allow me to use these visuals to kind of demonstrate. If we speak in a very defeated manner, then we have an increased chance of thinking in very defeated patterns. And if we think in very defeated patterns, we're more likely to act very defeated well before we're even defeated in a specific task. Furthermore, if we speak helplessly, we're more likely to think in helpless patterns, thus, again, more likely to act helplessly. It's according to these theories that your words are actually at the forefront of behavioral change, which is why it's very important to guard, to protect, and to be purposeful with the words that come out of your mouth, as there's a strong possibility that your thoughts and behaviors will follow suit. So to be clear, we don't need to be fancy English majors who use multisyllabic words to impress other people at social gatherings. That's not the point. The point here, according to these theories, is that we must be intentional with what we say. In other words, to mean what we say and to say what we mean, to be fully aware of the ramifications of each word that comes out of our very mouths. So if you ever notice that your behavior perhaps is not conducive of a positive change, or perhaps you notice that you have a tendency to think very pessimistically or in a means that projects low self-esteem, it's very challenging to change these patterns of behaviors and change these patterns of thoughts. So a good life hack here, based on the self-fulfilling prophecy as well as the results of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the good life hack is simply to change your language, as the words you use serve as the catalyst for both your thoughts and actions. And if this analogy helps here, if there's any car folks out there, if your mind was a car, your words are essentially the gas. So upon feeding your car correctly, it's almost inevitable that roads that seem to previously be closed off to you, roads that seem to be restricted to you in the past, can all of a sudden become journeys in which you're capable of traveling. This is the power of language. For those that are more hands-on learners, let's use this activity to differentiate just how those with grit, growth, and creator mindsets truly think. So again, let's pretend this is you. And remember, we're not perfect. Sometimes we will instinctively say negative things. It happens. So I want to make this very clear. Grit, with regards to your language, is not about speaking perfectly all the time, because that's just impossible. What grit, with regard to language, truly is, it's about correcting yourself once you realize that what you're thinking and saying is not conducive of positive behavior. Here's an example. Let's assume you accidentally said something with a victim mindset. In this case, you said, "I'm tired." Now, I know what you may be thinking, that this is an innocent statement, but if so, this is exactly why topics and lectures like this need to exist. I'm certain that everyone taking this class has said this before, that I'm tired. Matter of fact, some of you probably said it today. But the reason it can be classified as having a victim mindset as opposed to those with a creator mindset is because this statement basically removed your role. It removed your power in this situation. You've made a statement and left yourself literally no room for a solution. I'm tired, okay? Now what? What am I supposed to do with this information? As an alternative, a creator would actually rephrase it like this: I need to find a way to wake up. Do you see the difference there? Both people are in the same position we're all in. Both of them are tired. But the difference between the victim and the creator is that the creator has recognized that they play a role in this situation. We're all tired. At some point in our life, we're all going to be tired, fatigued, exhausted, whatever you want to call it. We are all it. But only some have the wherewithal to truly accept the accountability that takes to actually wake up from being tired. That waking up is actually their choice. So as a creator, your role is not simply to state the facts, it's to take it one step further and identify possible solutions. Let's take a look at example number 2. In this case, a victim mindset, or a victim statement more specifically, is saying, my professor slash teacher is annoying. So As you process this, feel free to pause the video and think of, okay, well, how would a creator rephrase the statement so that way they put themselves in a position to actually make change here? When you think about it, feel free to unpause the video and I'll see you in the next slide. One creator option is simply to say, if I do what I have to do, I'll succeed even if I don't like them. So again, do you see the difference? Both people are in the same position. They're being taught by a person who has no business being their teacher or their professor. But once again, the difference in the creator is that they understand life circumstances don't always have to be perfect. Perhaps because of the situation I'm in, I can drop the class. Maybe I can find an alternative class. Maybe I can find a completely different subject. Or in this case, maybe I can accept that liking someone and doing well for myself are not mutually exclusive ideas. In other words, keep your power, maintain your creator mindset. For our third and final example, one with very somber and serious tones to it, perhaps you had a very tough day, a challenging week, or even a really difficult year or even years. Perhaps you had a moment to really just reassess what's happening in your life and you feel like you're on the verge of a collapse. You're on the verge of catastrophe. You're on the verge of breaking down. So you have an honest moment and you ask, how did things get so messed up? A statement that can be generally said or thought by any of us. In fact, some of us have probably already experienced this or experiencing these sentiments right now as you view this very lecture. But I urge you, even in such despair, even in such challenging times, what's a better way of rephrasing this to really reinsert ourselves into the situation, restore the much needed power that's required to essentially rise again? So if you want to take a moment again, feel free to pause the video at this point and process this information and ask yourself, how do I become a creator even in a situation like this? The more creator solution to this particular example is as follows. Mistakes are a part of life. I'll take with me what I can learn and I'll disregard what is toxic. And I know this is a very simple, very straightforward sentence, but again, if you take a look at the spirit of what it entails, you've reinserted yourself into the situation. You've reclaimed the power that's required to overcome the particular situation. And if I haven't made this clear by now, allow me to use this example to do so. There's really not a single rational person in this world that believes life will be absolutely utopian perfection. A life where you wake up and eat pancakes every morning. A life where every person you come across will agree with everything you say and share the same opinions of you. They'll love the same things you love just as passionately. A life where ups exist but downs do not. A life where learning occurs but struggle is non-existent. A life where every decision you make and action you take is 100% perfection, because this is not reality. So the best alternative to this, because I'm assuming we can all agree that life will have its ups and downs, is to acknowledge these facts, to accept that there are lessons to be learned throughout all of life. And in order for good to happen, bad must exist. Otherwise, how could you tell the difference? Sometimes these lessons, yes, they will be heartbreaking. Sometimes, yes, they will feel to the point of they're unbearable. But if you garner enough perspective to really take each opportunity as a device for learning, whilst disregarding and letting go of its toxic residue, then please tell me, what in this world will be truly strong enough to stop you? At this juncture, we have now reached the single most important part of today's lecture. So if you need to use a restroom or drink some coffee to get reawoken or re-alert, please do so now, because what I'm about to share is the central idea of today's entire lecture with regard to the effects of language on thoughts and action. But once you are ready, what I'm going to need you to do is simply pause the video and think of every single time that you or someone you know use the word try in a sentence. For example, I will try to call you, or I will try to be there for you. I will try to do my best, or fundamentally speaking, I'll try to be happy. So once again, when you are ready, feel free to pause this video and think of all the times in life that you or someone you know use the word try. And once you spend enough time really reflecting on your personal examples, feel free to meet me in the next slide. Now that you've taken a moment to really process your examples of the word try, I want to tell you a secret in case you don't already know. Out of all the words in the English vocabulary, the word try is not only one of the single most disrespectful words to yourself and to those who use it, but it's also the emptiest word in the entire English lexicon. If you took the word try and opened it as if you were a surgeon dissecting the English language, you would find absolutely nothing inside. pure emptiness, no signs of any substance whatsoever. And for you visual folks, allow me to further elaborate this point. If you take a look at the picture on the PowerPoint, you will see two hands holding the world. If you will, do me a favor and stick your palms out as the picture illustrates and imagine yourself, again, holding the entire world, even if just for a moment. And I know it may feel silly. In fact, this activity is silly, but do me a favor and entertain this for a moment because it does have a purpose. So again, now that the entire world is in your hands, do me a favor and grab it by both sides and stretch that world as if you're pulling a rubber band. Pulling, pulling, pulling until you reach its most elastic point of resistance. In other words, to the point where it's impossible to pull any further. Now, if you take a peek at what the world looks like from that vantage point, what you'll find is quite magnificent, as the underlying infrastructure of this world is now exposed as a result of your pulling. And what you'll finally be ready to see, what this world, but more precisely what this life is comprised of, is not the word try. Rather, it's going to be comprised of processes, step-by-step processes that allow you to go from one point to another. So something as simple as tying your shoe has its set of processes, while something as complex as graduating with your college degree, finding love, or engaging in the pursuit of happiness has their own unique sets of processes. That is why I will not try to call you. I will call you. I will make a time or identify a time rather that works for both of us. I will make sure that your phone number is saved correctly and I will call you at that time and we will talk. But more importantly, when we talk, I will ensure there are no distractions so we're completely present in our communication, both actively listening and speaking when appropriate. Again, I will not try to call you, I will call you. I will not try to finish my homework. I will read the assignment directions, I will understand the rubric, I will do my research, and I will complete the assignment as it's intended. And if I don't know how to do something, I'll reach out for clarification. I will email professors, I will ask peers, I will reach out to mentors and to tutors. I will find out what the appropriate processes are. Again, I will not try to finish my homework, I will finish my homework. I will not try to get over heartbreak. I will be human. I will allow myself to grieve. I will allow myself to cry, to question, to wonder, to be angry. Because as long as I'm not trying, I am processing. And as long as I am processing, I'm working my way to an eventual solution. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually I will process my way out of such darkness. The point is, when we use words like try, we eliminate the beautiful details that make life life. We ignore the possibilities, the redemption, the rhythm of life. We take the action and decision-making processes and we cover it like a blanket when we use an empty word like try. Using try is essentially the equivalent of giving life a big-ass middle finger, as try takes all the beautiful, the resilience, the innate power that is pouring through your very being and it discards it as if it is trash that is no longer needed. That is the poison that exists in the empty DNA of a word like try. Now, if you need more proof regarding the power of these concepts, I'd like to take a moment to share a very personal story. While I don't normally like to speak on my own accomplishments or my own trials and tribulations, for the purpose of this presentation, I do feel it's necessary to really drive home the point, to really demonstrate that what I'm sharing are not just empty words or textbook regurgitations, but rather they're essential ideas for which I truly live by. In 2015, I was the youngest graduating doctor in my class. I took a 4-year PhD program and completed it nearly a year early. My research was immediately published, and subsequently thereafter, I became the youngest professor at the previous college at which I taught. Fast forward to now, I'm on a tenure track position here as a counselor and professor, which, if you're not familiar with the term, tenure, it basically means I have this job for life as long as I don't do anything that is egregiously illegal or negligent, of course. And while it's easy to look at life now with blind optimistic acceptance as if things were and have always been such a wonderful and inspiring story, there are a significant number of obstacles and crushing heartbreak that I had to experience to prepare me for the present moment. For starters, immediately after I was born, my parents were divorced, so right out of the gate, I was marked as a quote-unquote at-risk child for living in a quote-unquote non-traditional home. Because of this separation, despite being an avid sports fan and athlete growing up as a child, I never had that father figure to teach me how to throw a football or how to defend myself or how to fight against bullies, how to change a flat tire or anything else that's embodied by a father-son relationship. This was especially true because in 1994, my father, who was already barely around to begin with, actually died of a severe stroke. And it left my mom, my beautiful, hardworking mother, in a position where she basically had to work hours on hours on hours to support her family, who was barely able to stabilize in the hoods of East Vallejo. And while my father was gone and my mother, bless her heart, was always working hard, but unfortunately not as present with me growing up, I was fortunately able to live and be raised with my loving grandparents. But during my time as a graduate student, my grandfather also passed away due to respiratory and heart issues. I still remember this death very vividly because I was in LA, and as I got back to my hotel room, I called my grandparents to check in, something I do every night, and the world stopped because on until this day I can literally still hear my grandmother cry in the background, and she was too broken to even speak to me. Just hearing her sob and kind of dry heave and all the things that come with trauma and grief. Truly to this day, it's one of the more helpless feelings I've ever had to experience, knowing that somebody you love is in profound pain and I couldn't see them or even speak to them or even console her for the least bit because we're in separate cities. In my early 20s, if that wasn't bad enough, I lost my high school sweetheart who was barely old enough to legally have a beer. At the age of 21, she was unexpectedly diagnosed and later died of skin cancer. In the same year, I lost two childhood friends to gun violence just a few months apart. One killed outside of a shopping center, the other fatally shot in his own car. Upon entering college as a first generation college student, I honestly had a hard time adjusting. I was unaware of the ebbs and flows of college, unaware of who to look up to and who to learn from. But fortunately, after a few years in college, I got close to one, I repeat, one professor, despite all my time in college, one professor that I truly felt finally I had this authentic connection with someone. In a few years after developing our relationship and our friendship and our mentorship, she unfortunately too died of cancer. Quite possibly one of the toughest people I've ever met. She was strong enough to survive her first bout of cancer, but when it returned after a brief remission, round two was unfortunately less forgiving. And ultimately, I can keep going, but I'm going to assume at this point you get what I'm saying here. It's easy for us educators to paint this perfect picture and say work hard and play hard and earn dreams, but I'm also a realist, and I'm here today to acknowledge that all of your lives will have moments of parallel struggle. Your life will have episodes of sadness, feelings of helplessness, feelings in some cases of being unwanted or not good enough. None of us will be exceptions to these inevitable events. The difference, though, the difference between us is that some of us will use these experiences for what they are designed to do, and that is to learn. Because many times these difficult, heartbreaking, soul crushing events actually end up being the best teachers in life. And that is what grit is all about. It was never about perfection. It was never about ease. It was never about convenience. Rather, it's about perspective and understanding how life works, both good and bad. So if you ever need to cry, don't try, just cry. If you ever need to take a few days away and disconnect from your daily routine, don't try, disconnect. If you need to identify new positive outlets in life, like exercise or balanced nutrition or basic meditation or any other forms of holistic cleansing, don't try, do these things. Because the sooner you train yourself to embrace your power, the sooner the world's possibilities will open up to you, as things that appeared closed off will all of a sudden have the potential of breaking wide open. And as you sit here and listen to what I'm saying, I hope you pull away at least one thing from this lesson: that yes, you are unique and you have experienced a myriad of challenges and successes that even I could not fathom, things that I couldn't even relate to if I quote unquote tried. But while I acknowledge your struggles and your perceived limitations as well as your successes, I wholeheartedly know that the number one factor that will determine your success in your life full of meaningfulness will not be solely dictated by your looks or your wealth or your experiences or your family structure, no matter how perfect or damaged they may seem. Because while all these are all important factors, I authentically believe that none of these factors will define you more than your willingness to be gritty. Because if you can learn to maneuver through reality on reality's terms, perhaps you will not avoid a significant amount of disappointment and struggle, but you will develop enough equity to be able to cope. And at the very least, you'll learn to find solace knowing that each detriment or each obstacle you come across, yes, it has the ability to be painful because, of course, we are human after all. But more importantly, each detriment and each obstacle that you come across can not only be painful, but it can also potentially serve as a launching point towards healing. So, my question to you, class, is if you later learn that pain, the pain that you experience today, would later serve as a catalyst for future opportunity and transformation, would you be willing to look at your current struggles and give yourself a little bit more grace and forgiveness? Because if you are willing to do that, then congratulations, you're beginning to understand what grit is truly about. Beyond discussing what we should not do, like use words like quote unquote try, allow me now to switch gears and focus on what we should do. So, if I haven't already mentioned this, prior to becoming a professional counselor, I dabbled in the career of kinesiology, where I was a personal trainer and eventually was going to be a strength and conditioning coach. And while I was in the industry of sports and performance psychology, I learned about an idea known as the fundamental goal concept. And basically, what this means is that all of us have goals, whether our goals are to graduate or to find love or to lose 5 pounds or gain 5 pounds. These are all what's referred to as outcome goals. What the fundamental goal concept states, though, is that having an outcome goal isn't enough. In order for us to actually achieve our goals, we must break these into its individual parts. And these parts are known as processes, or more specifically, process goals. So let's take this for example. Let's say I want to lose 1 pound, which is my outcome goal. The natural question then is how? What's the process to doing this? Well, if you understand how calories work, then you know that every 3,500 calories, meaning 3,500, every 3,500 calories equals 1 pound. So if I add an excess of 3,500 calories to what I'm already eating, I will gain 1 pound. If I cut a deficit of 3,500 calories from what I'm already eating, I will lose 1 pound. That is one step towards the process, which makes these outcome goals actually realistic things to achieve. The rabbit hole here regarding the fundamental goal concept is that each process can then be broken down to even more specific sub processes. This is the power that I was referring to earlier, something I recommend you do not give up because our options toward desired solutions in some cases can be endless. So, again, let me remind you that 3,500 calories equals 1 pound. So, let's say I want to lose weight, but I want to do so conservatively. 3,500 calories, after all, is a lot of calories. So, let's kind of take this step by step. If I choose to start off by cutting 500 calories out of my diet, and perhaps I can do this for 7 days, well, if you're a math whiz, you'll know that 500 calories times 7 days equals the 3,500 calories we mentioned earlier. So, what that means then is in 7 days, I will lose 1 full pound. If I do this for another 7 days, I'll lose a total of 2 pounds. If I do this for another 7 days again, or 3 weeks more specifically, I'll lose another pound, which equates to 3 pounds in total. I do this for a month, boom, 4 pounds right there. And no, it's not water weight. No, it's not based on a fad diet. I'm literally losing one entire, or in this case, 4 entire pounds of myself. That is the beauty of processes. But again, what's crazy about this is that these processes are still nearly endless. So, in addition to knowing that I'll cut out 500 calories per day, I can keep breaking this down to even more specific detail. What will I cut out to equal 500 calories? What will I do if I crave chocolate? What does exercising do to impact my desire to eat? Is it better if I food prep so I know exactly how much food I'm eating, when I'm actually eating it? The point is, success and satisfaction are not merely found in having these outcome goals. The true value is found in smaller, more intimate details that underlie these goals, also known as process goals, which serves as the spirit and essence of the fundamental goal concept. So, at the expense of sounding like a broken record, I must reiterate, if we refuse to quote unquote try and instead focus on these details, these processes, these process goals, by default, we become what's known as smarter P. And these are individuals who are very specific in what it is they want and what it is they do. They are measured, they are not victims, instead, they are action oriented. They're realistic. They're aware of time and are very timely with their processes. They evaluate so that way they know if something is not working, they can reevaluate and change something. They reinforce things when, yes, they are actually working. And lastly, they prioritize based on the values in which they deem appropriate and, more importantly, important to them and their particular value system. And if we fall in love with these details, with these processes, not only will there be no room for trying anymore, but we will only have room for precision because we know how detailed we can be in our life pursuits. But even with this knowledge, I must emphasize focusing on the processes still will not guarantee success because, of course, life simply is not that linear. What it does encourage, though, is resilience when things don't initially work. So even if you don't hit your target initially, which oftentimes will be the case, even if you have to take a couple of steps back, which again will be the case, As long as you quote unquote stop trying and actually start paying attention to what it is that you are doing, regardless of whether or not it is working, you increase your chances of eventually aligning the requirements of a goal with the skill set you've acquired because A, you're finally paying attention, and B, you become stalwart even in the face of adversity, which allows you to become slightly more comfortable even during times of distress. And when you hit that target, when the skills you have actually align with the task's requirements, you open the door towards a concept known as flow, which is manifested in the marriage of your skills and your abilities with the task at hand. A concept that feels so effortless, that looks so natural, that it becomes nearly impossible to distinguish you from the task that you're actually completing. Eventually, when you experience flow enough times in life, the next inevitable step would be persistence, which is continued success, making it possible for satisfaction and success to be a natural part of your daily processes. Although I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, I am a fan of the following statement: do or do not, there is no try. And to make this clear, I stand by this statement so much that if I ever use the word try in a serious way, in other words, I'll make fun of it from time to time. Sometimes I'll say, hey, don't quote unquote try this, or don't quote unquote try that, just to kind of bring it up to make sure that none of us are truly using it. But if I ever truly use it in a serious way, like I'll try to help you, I'll try to get back to you, or I'll try my best during this lecture. If I ever use that word, either during a lecture, if I ever type it during an email, if I ever mention it during any office hours or counseling hours, literally anytime, if I ever say it, call me out, we'll document the event, and I will literally give the entire class an automatic A on your final. So, with that said, good luck because that's not going to happen. In my years of teaching, it has never happened, and I'm going to do everything in my power to never let such poison ever come out of my lips outside of actually giving this particular lecture or calling someone else out for saying it themselves. That is how much I despise that word. So, once again, do or do not. There is no try.
Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Beyond the watch, there are ways out. There is a light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Beyond the watch, the gods will offer you chances. Know them. Take them. You can't beat death, but you can beat death in life, sometimes. And the more often you learn to do it, the more light there will be. Your life is your life. Know it while you have it. You are marvelous. The gods wait to delight in you. If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you are going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind. Go all the way. It could mean not eating for 3 or 4 days. It could mean freezing on a park bench. It could mean jail. It could mean derision, mockery, isolation. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And you'll do it, despite rejection and the worst odds. And it will be better than anything else you can imagine. If you're going to try, go all the way. There is no other feeling like that. You will be alone with the gods, and the nights will flame with fire. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. All the way. All the You will line straight to perfect laughter. It's the only good fight there is.
Closing quote. Sometimes you climb out of bed in the morning and you think, I am not going to make it. But you laugh inside, remembering all the times you felt that way. Charles Bukowski. So, in closing, class, please remember when life gets tough, you have the ability to get tougher. When life gets bad, you have the ability to become the baddest person in the room. Never allow your circumstance to feel bigger than you because you are far more powerful than such temporary states. That is the essence and spirit of what it means to have grit and to achieve flow. So, on that note, thank you all for all you've done to make it here today. I appreciate you and your beautiful yet gritty souls, and I will see you in the next module.